Morning. The way I'm going to distinguish this morning meeting from assembly is begin by ringing the bell of mindfulness. The guest speaker actually brought this as a gift for my class for the school last year when he was here, and it's actually picked this. It's from Tibet. So I'm going to ring it once. Just relax, be in the moment, breathe deeply, and then I'll ring it at the end. Just 1 minute of silence together. Thank you. See, we're all in a good place right now. We're exactly where we should be in mind, heart, body, and spirit. Our guest speaker this morning was here last year. That was his first trip back to Taft in over 40 years. He graduated in 1965. He was on the championship basketball team, and we didn't win the championship again until I think it was 2005, so there was a 40-year drought. He was on that team. He was also ran track, and he did cross country. But he's had a fantastic, really interesting life since then, and with many people, he helped to found a school, the Mount Madonna School in Watsonville, California, near Santa Cruz. It's an independent school, K through 12, and a real focus on values and character development and seeing the interconnectedness, the interdependent nature of all life. And so it's a fascinating school. He might talk a little bit about that, I'm not sure. And also, he takes students on trips to India. He knows the Dalai Lama personally. Students meet with the Dalai Lama. They work in the orphanage. The Dalai Lama's sister has an orphanage outside of Dharamsala, India. And also to South Africa to meet with Bishop Desmond Tutu. And so he's got a lot of interesting experiences to share. He doesn't want me to do too long of an introduction. So he went to Taft, and he went to University of North Carolina and did his graduate work at Sonoma State in California. He is a native of California, and I think at least nine different people in his family have gone to Taft. So let us warmly welcome Mr. Ward Mailliard. Mailliard.
Hi. I was just down in New Jersey at a conference on community and transformation with this amazing guy named Peter Block. And he's been a mentor and a colleague. He's written some really interesting books. One of the books, when I first got it, the title was "The Answer to How is Yes." And when I got the book, I didn't really read it that carefully because the title was so good. I thought I knew what was inside. And so often we are saying, well, how do we do this? How long will it take? But the real question is why? Why? How is not the most important question. So when I think about a place like Taft, Taft is in some ways perfected education, although I'm sure if the teachers standing in the back will realize that we're all figuring it out every day. But the question is why? Why are we investing in you? Why are we educating you? And that's actually a question that I think you guys have to answer. Excuse me, my glasses are getting in the way. What I do with my students, I teach 11th and 12th grade at Mount Madonna School, and what I do with my students is nowadays I take a blank book and I say, here's your textbook, now we're going to fill it in. And because I think that from my perspective, learning is not about what I have to say. One time when I was asking my kids at the end of the year what worked, a lot of times I put them into small groups and get them talking, and one of the girls raised her hand and she said, you know what really works for me is the small groups. She says, when I'm with my peers and I'm talking to them, I really learn from them. And when you talk, I don't listen. Holy cow. Sorry, my apologies. This is the power of the iPhone to get me where I don't want to be gotten. So I didn't have a clue what I was going to talk to you guys about today. I've been thinking about it for 3 weeks, and you get 10 minutes to tell you everything you know. And I don't know that much, but 10 minutes isn't enough. So I was talking to some kids here today, young men today, and I'm just blown away. Somebody just asked me, he said, tell us what it was like, was it different when you were at Taft? And I said, well, you guys are smarter, better looking, and more athletic than we were. And that's basically the difference. And I also want you to know that I'm here out of an act of love. I don't like my students. I love my students. And I think every teacher that teaches knows that teaching is an act of unrequited love. And I think that was a big turning point in my career as a teacher. Is I do an educational conference at Taft, at Mount Madonna every year. And I bring educators and I have students in the room. And we were doing what's called a fishbowl. And I had taken the kids to Washington to interview government leaders. And we got pretty good access and we have a lot of fun doing it. And so we put them in a fishbowl, which is we put them in the middle of the group of adults that were there and talked about their experiences. And this good friend of mine came up to me at the end, and she's a brilliant, brilliant woman. And she says, Ward, she says, I don't exactly know how to say this. She said, but I noticed that you accomplished everything you wanted to accomplish with your students. And I know your program and I know what you're trying to do and I see how incredibly successful you've been. She said, I'm not sure how to phrase this. She says, but I notice that there's no emotional shelf in you for them to put their gratitude on. And I had this sudden shock of recognition. And she said, there must be a story about that. And I turned to her and I said, Claire, there are so many stories about that I stopped telling them a long time ago. But I took it as a kind of a challenge because what I realized was that I was spending my time teaching my heart out but protecting myself. Because love hurts. You love your students and when it doesn't come back, and you guys aren't supposed to give it back to us, you're supposed to challenge us and confuse us and be enigmatic and all of that. It's your job. But I realized that I wasn't putting myself in the way of being vulnerable with my students because we have to be in control of our classrooms, right? If you can't control your classroom, you're not a good teacher. And so it's all about dominance and control. And so what do? We tell you stories that make you behave, like if you don't get good grades, you won't get into college and you won't get a good job and your life will be ruined. And it's the only lever we have, And when you think about it, lining you up in rows and talking at you, if you're not in an act of rebellion, there's something wrong with you. At Taft, I know it's different. I know you're in dialogue. I know your teachers know you. I know they care about you. And I know that they love you. And I know that probably sometimes it's really scary about that. So I decided to challenge that notion, and I decided I would invite my students into the process. So that year, of all years, the Dalai Lama Foundation some people show up in my classroom because somebody told them about what I was doing. And at the end of the class, they came up to me and the woman was weeping. She said, you're the one to do this project. And I said, what project? She said, well, we'd like you to write a curriculum with your students for the Dalai Lama's book, Ethics for the New Millennium. And I started doing a cost-benefit analysis in my head. I went, holy cow, this is going to cost me a year if I do this. So then I thought about what's my price. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, I think we should talk to him. And they said, oh, okay, you want to go to India and talk to him? I said, yeah, let's do that. And so at the beginning of the year after this epiphany that I had in the summer at we call it Chautauqua. We stole it from Chautauqua, New York. And so after I went back into the classroom, I said to my kids, I said, we're going to write a curriculum, and I don't know how to do this. And we're going to go to India, and we're going to talk to the Dalai Lama. And we have to design this, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Thinking, this is really cool. I'm being vulnerable, I'm letting my kids into the process and all that. And that was all good until one day I was out in the little courtyard, and we have a very small school. I was out in the courtyard, and I heard one kid say to another, "Oh yeah, SN," that's what they call me. They said, "Oh yeah, SN we're helping him design his course because he doesn't know what he's doing." And then I realized, if I was really going to go down this path, I had to really be ready to walk this path. Because when you actually hear a student tell the truth, which is that you don't know what you're doing, and they're going to help, then you realize now that the ground is shifted, and that vulnerability is not necessarily an easy path. As my friend Vivian said to me when I was talking to her about it, she says, you have to impale yourself on the change you want to bring into the world. You have to be the thing that you're talking about. This goes to authenticity. So I got some cliff notes from this brilliant group of young men that I spoke with this morning. And they were brilliant. And they were brilliant because they were authentically themselves. And so the first thing he said is, I said, well, if you were giving a speech, what would you say to the kids at Taft? And he says, well, right away, one of the guys says, make your life here meaningful. And I said, well, what does that mean? He said, take advantage of the things that are here. And then there were several dovetails into that. And one that I thought was really profound was the notion of get outside your bubble. We all tend to gravitate towards a certain group where we're comfortable. But there's all of these incredible people, some of whom may be very different. And they say, yeah, get outside the bubble. What did he say? Get into the metaphorical danger zone. What a cool expression, the metaphorical danger zone. I'm not sure what it means, but I love it. But use the resources. And one of them said, yeah, get to know your advisor as more than just, somebody who's to help you get through the system, but get to know them on a personal basis. So there's something about being present. Because so much of this is about getting into college and doing the things that we need to do to get ahead that you might miss what's here. When I came back from my 20th reunion, which was like 25 years ago, which is really scary, because emotionally I'm not that much different than you, even now, right? I haven't really grown up that much. The big comment was, God, we were mean to each other. It was all boys then, and the presence of women at Taft is like, wow, what a game changer, and I'm jealous. I was here 5 years, no women. It took me a long time to get over that. I'm telling you. Let's see. And then one of them said, well, get the school motto in there. Non ut sibi ministrator sed ut ministrate. That, in a funny way, had power for me when I was here. It was always present somehow, to understand that the education that you're getting here is not just about you. I think last time I mentioned to you, and it's worth saying, you occupy a strata of privilege that's so thin that it can't be measured. We can't even give a percentage to it. You're at one of the most elite institutions in the world, not in the country, in the world. And you're having an investment in your education that is way disproportionate. If we were looking at the educational footprint, your educational footprint is 12 times the size of most of the average of the world. And so why would we do that? Well, I think Taft got it right. To serve. And in this project that we did going to India, it was called Project Happiness. And we spent a year trying to figure out what was the difference between Short-term gratification and long-term happiness. We all know about short-term gratification. We spend most of our time there, right? But the long-term happiness, what was that about? And after a year's study and interviewing famous and infamous and normal and being in dialogue and reading Ethics for the New Millennium, it came down to two things. It came down to relationship and serving something greater than yourself. And so as you sort of are getting ready to set out on life, I think it makes a lot of sense to think about that journey and do a little bit of research on what actually produces happiness. And you get to define it. Nobody gets to tell you what happiness is. That's up to you. There's no one right answer to this question. But there's a field in which happiness occurs. And the Dalai Lama in Ethics for the New Millennium says he noticed that people who had ethical frameworks tended to be happier. I think that's worth investigating. I think it's worth questioning. So in my classroom, as I talk to my students, I say, I don't know the truth. Let's look at it and let's try to figure this out together. I'll tell you what I think. But what matters in some ways, more than what I think, is how you're thinking. So there's no right answer. There's only the quality of your thinking. And this goes to the core of what I do, is what I'm interested in is discernment. And this last year I had a very hard year with my seniors. So in case you think because, did I lose my papers here? I had a statement of purpose. Yes, here it is. So my seniors didn't get along very well, and so there was this friction. And it made it really hard to be engaged. And so I had a tough year, and I thought about it over the summer, and it really bothered me. And I was wondering whether I could continue to teach or not. Because I thought, well, if you're not interested in the things that matter to me, what the heck am I doing here? So in self-defense, I wrote up what I think I'm doing. And the reason I'm there is for the development of the capacities of discernment through the process of study, reflection, and dialogue. And I want to talk a minute about dialogue, and then we probably should call it a day. For our evolution and happiness as human beings in the service of the collective good. So what this is about is the capacity of you to develop your minds, to develop your self-awareness, to develop your consciousness, to develop the capacity of discernment to figure out what's true and what's not true, what's real and what's not real, what's good and what's not good, as you define it. To develop those capacities of discernment. So what I put my money on is if I work with young people and I help them develop their capacity of discernment to see clearly what matters in life, and then hopefully have the courage to act on it, then that's my contribution to the world. So that's what I do. And the methodologies, well, sometimes you have to use shock therapy, so we go to South Africa, say, I have an idea, let's go to a completely different culture, and let's meet people out on the margins who you imagine may be deprived in some ways, and they are in terms of material things, and discover the power of their humanity and what they have to teach us. So sometimes you have to go a long way to make the point, and I'm willing to go around the world to make that point. One of the girls said to me after we were at Bachabello, the Children's AIDS Project, she had this beautiful photo. It was like the Madonna holding this baby in her arms that was AIDS infected. And when we came home, she said, I never had a feeling like that. And when I got home, my arms felt empty. And I thought when she looked into that baby's face, it changed her life forever. Because it was no longer an abstraction, it was real. And it was a human being there. And the care was there. And so it was a reconnection. And what's affecting our world right now is disconnection. Disconnection between rich and poor. Disconnection between ideas of the common good. Disconnection between the ambitions of religion and the ambitions of politics. So connecting is healing. So connecting with each other in this community, the idea that this is going to happen later on sometime, and when you get to college, somehow you're going to reorient yourself towards your humanity. I think your humanity is now. And so kindness, like one of the guy said to me, yeah, I noticed that we were being kind of tough on this one person, and I realized that what that person must feel like, and decided not to do that anymore. And I thought, that will change your life. Empathy will change your life. Care will change your life. And one of the things that I noticed when I came back 20 years later was the kids who seemed to have all the spotlight on them were still the same people, wonderful people with the spotlight on them, but there were all these people that I missed who were doing fascinating things, who were interesting thinkers and had done wonderful things with their lives. They were interesting people, and I found my orientation sort of changing, and going, wow, how did I miss that? So there's somebody sitting in this audience here that you don't really know that might be meaningful to your life. And these relationships you will carry for a lifetime. So look around again. Look again. Respect comes from respectare. It means the willingness to look again. This is an incredible community. I think the ethos of this community, every community has challenges and problems, but you deal with them, and you deal with them in a conscious way. You are good-hearted people. I know you to be that, and it's a kinder and gentler place than when I was here. I want to read you one thing. This is a total non sequitur, so that's the end of that thought. Here's another thought, and then we can do whatever we do next. This comes from Robert Inchausti, and I'm a bit of an intellectual stalker. When I find somebody who interests me, I go meet them. And I recommend that to you. You would be surprised how accessible people are. If you have a hero, go meet him. Send him a letter, write him an email. You'll be amazed. You have so much power as young people. When a young person shows up and pay attention, we'll give you our wallets. Really, you have this power. If you're interested and show up, you'll be the kind of person that someone wants to mentor. And that's all we want to do. We just want to pass it on. That's a secret, okay? You have power. And Inchausti says something, and this is kind of moving into the philosophical, political dimensions, but I just think it's something that I want you to think about, and if you don't get it, don't worry, because I didn't get it either at first. But he says, the postmodern wasteland has in its sources three developments. The perpetual revolution of economic life that generates endless new individual needs and endless new poverties, laying waste to the planet's ecology at the very moment it creates vast new social wealth. Folks, there's too many of us. The exodus from the land of Pharaoh, from empire, is going to be through sparsity. We are going to have to find a new aesthetic for wealth and for happiness and for success if we as a species are going to survive. An increasingly managed information system centered around a mass media that exalts received ideas over direct experience. I'm going to read that again. An increasingly managed information system centered around a mass media that exalts received ideas over direct experience, creating in the process pseudo-environments and modernized stupidity, disguised and given credibility through the sheer pervasiveness of its presence. You must examine the narrative of our society and our world critically and decide for yourselves. I don't care what you decide. Think about it. Don't receive the ideas as though somehow they come down from the mount carved in stone. They don't. Human beings created this. Human beings can change it. The question is it working? Last idea, and this is the hardest one. A disintegrated and dispirited family life, increasingly powerless to protect its members against the cultural hegemony of economically driven world systems. That's a huge statement. That sentimentalizes interpersonal values, thereby destroying their revolutionary potential by rendering them the private property of alienated individuals. instead of the solid ground upon which universal human solidarity might be built. So when we fragment the society, we can control the society. So that the interpersonal relationship is not a sentimentalized thing. Interpersonal relationships are the foundation upon which a society is built. When we are in relatedness with each other, and there's a William Stafford poem that says, if I don't know who you are and you don't know who I am, a story that others have made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong road home, we may miss our star. So we need to know each other. We need to be in dialogue. No one person has a handle on the truth. We got to work it out together. It's too complicated for one person. We have to see it from the variety of perspectives. And that's why the person that you know the least is maybe the most important person, because they've got a perspective that you haven't heard yet. They've got a story that you haven't heard yet. So what I have discovered, my happiness these days is, and it's so weird because I'm not a good listener, but is to listen to people and how they make sense to themselves. And when I do that, something extraordinary happens. To be in curiosity rather than criticality. And when I'm in curiosity and not criticality, there's something that opens up in my knowing that's powerful and brings me joy. And so if I were to say I had a ministry at this point, it's listening. So I hope to get a chance to actually talk and listen to a few of you, because I didn't come to teach here, I came to learn. Thanks for your attention.